Welcome to the Good Practice Show. I am Faik Pirzadeh, your host. And our guest today is Martin King. Martin has spent over 4 decades in pharmaceutical and medical device regulations across FDA, EMA, MDR, IVDR, and Swissmedic. That's longer than I've been alive. He's also a trained ISO lead auditor, vice chair of regulatory compliance certification programs within the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. He is also the owner of the QARA group on LinkedIn with over 17,000 regulatory professionals. And he's also creator of the RAQA Actionable AI, where he releases practical AI tools for the regulatory professionals. Martin, welcome.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So most regulatory professionals, they just know one corner of the industry, whereas you've been a CEO, a COO, the head of QA, and now you're consulting on your own. So take me back a few years. What did a typical week look like before any of this AI stuff in the life of Martin King?
So, when I started out, we didn't have a quality department or a regulatory department. I was working in the National Health Service of Great Britain. I was a medical physics technician. I was responsible for developing test equipment and for testing equipment all over the hospitals or several hospitals and keeping them running, keeping them. And sometimes a doctor would call me and say, in critical care, is this instrument calibrated? Is it measuring correctly? And sometimes the doctor was using his mercury sphygmomanometer and he could actually measure, because he was experienced professional, he could measure better than the instrument in those days.
Wow.
So I started out in a situation where if you had to apply regulations and standards, you had to read them, you had to interpret them. There wasn't a regulatory department or a quality department there to help you. And if you wanted to test a piece of equipment, you took it to the test lab and you sat there in the test lab with the professional testers to go through the standard and test the equipment. So you really had to be doing everything. The profession wasn't as siloed as it is now. For me, the profession is very siloed now. But the real issue is when you're a developer. Basically, I was a development engineer. My education is microelectronics and material science at master's level, and I used to design microchips. And there are microchips all over the world from me.
Right.
But I haven't designed a microchip now for over 20 years, more than 20 years. So it just shows you that what you do stays there. It can come back. You always have to do a good job because it can come back and get you. And the same in quality and regulatory. So when you're a development engineer, there's a point in your career where you can no longer be a designer and developer and you have to grow. So it was a natural progression for me to move into regulatory and quality. And in between, yes, I worked in executive management roles. So I was a CEO 3 times in one form or another. I've been a COO. I've been a CTO. I have held these various roles. But one thing that is common, is perhaps unique about me, is that I have always remained hands-on. One of the jobs of a manager is to coach employees. So when you're a CEO, you have many other tasks to do other than, for instance, working at the technical level or the detailed level. But sometimes if you need something done quickly and your team does not have the experience and the skills, they still have to learn. Then sometimes it's better just to do it yourself to get it done and show the team how to do it, and therefore they know next time how to do it themselves. And that is a little bit how I've managed to remain hands-on. The other piece is that I have worked the whole value chain. So I've gone from working in a hospital So almost at the patient end, you know, stopping nurses from connecting ECG recorders at the time that would kill a heart transplant patient because of the leakage current, because that knowledge wasn't readily available at the time. And then I have went and worked in fundamental research in neuroscience. So I was measuring the current on a cell membrane, the actual way cells communicate. And then I moved into industry. Actually, I moved out of MedTech a little while. I was working in another regulatory industry, which is energy management, and I designed electricity meters. And then I went back into pharmaceuticals and built pharmaceutical manufacturing facilities for cell cultures. So actually, I have worked the whole value chain from an idea, a blank piece of paper, all the way through to doing design and development. And I would say people like to talk about research and development. Research and development, there are very few situations where it's really research. Most of the time, development and design and development, as we know in the standards and regulations, that's an executional task. Research is not regulated in that sense apart from the ethical side and the safety side. But from a design and development point of view, that's an executional task. Once you've done your research, now it's time to do a design something, design a product, and that becomes very executional. And that will upset many engineers out there who like to think of themselves as research and development engineers. But that's basically how the world is. That's how things have evolved. And so in the end, I have done regulatory submissions on all continents except Antarctica. There is not a big demand for pharmaceuticals and medical devices with the penguins. But, and like for during COVID, I was doing IVD rollout for PCR, point of care PCR testing across Africa. So I was having to do regulatory submissions in all states in Africa. So yes, the path that one takes is a path of reinvention. So when I was at executive level, I was traveling a lot. I think my record for travel was 22 flights a month. And at the same time, I was managing 100 people. And now I don't travel very much at all. I really have minimum travel. And so I've gone from, a permanent everyday traveling schedule, turned it around to a situation where I don't travel very much at all, just as people need me to travel is required. And a lot of the work with the change in technology that we have, the use of conferencing facilities like this, means that I've been able to execute complete projects, really complete projects, complete turnarounds where companies have had a complete rejection from the regulatory authorities, and you've had to rework all the documentation without ever meeting the team in person. And I've had several projects like that. So you can work with the tools we have today. It's very easy to work remotely in quality and regulatory because you don't, it's basically a documentation task. Yeah.
Anchoring back to the statement that's it's like much easier in today's day and age. How do you think AI has affected this entire workflow and how it has changed the regulatory landscape, so to speak?
How has AI impacted the regulatory business? It's impacted the regulatory business as an accelerator. We have to understand that AI is not new, right? AI, the first FDA products were over 20 years ago now. So AI in products is not used. The use of AI as a standard desktop tool, a little bit like Google search, is newer. Yes, we can say this is 3 to 5 years old. And how is it being used? It's been used as an acceleration tool. It's been used as a tool to help me write more efficiently and more quickly, to help me communicate so that I can write something that people can understand easier. The regulatory roundup I do on LinkedIn, most of my postings are basically created using AI agents, which I have written to help me be able to process more information efficiently. So I still read through the output, and sometimes I make single word changes, but essentially I'm using AI tools to accelerate my daily work. Now, most recently, I would say in the last year, it's now possible to apply what we call AI skills, and I've been running a series
Right.
on LinkedIn on this, and I continue to. There's still a couple of parts to go through. You applying AI skills, you're in a position to tame the beast, so to speak. What do I mean by taming the beast? When you type something in today in ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Copilot, Claude, any of these tools, what happens? You get a great response, but that response is probabilistic. The tool is open loop. It's basically going to a very large source of data and it's saying, what would be the most probable word to put together in this sentence and make this read like a professional writer would write? So what does that mean? It means we're left to how well we prompt to get how well we get an output.
Right.
So what you can do is you can contain this. You can contain the performance of an AI LLM tool. You can say to the LLM tool, I don't want you to use any knowledge from the general system. I want you to only look at this regulation. Here it is. I want you to only look at my SOP. Here it is. I want you to execute in these steps precisely. Regulatory work and quality work is very much workflow driven. You start here, you do one thing, you do another thing, and you end. You follow specific disciplined steps. And there's no reason why you can't do that with AI. The tools are all there. The challenge is that people have to learn how to use those tools. And moving forward, regulatory and quality professionals are going to have to be able to use those tools. The good news is you don't have to be an IT techie to use those tools. You can create these workflows using plain text. Where is all the industry going? Even without AI, we can say everything's going machine readable. Only last week, Health Canada announced how they want machine readable documents. If you do a submission of a software bill of materials to the FDA, you have to provide that as a JSON. You have to provide it in machine readable form. If you're
Wow.
doing an eCTD for a pharmaceutical submission, that is submitted in XML. It's basically an XML document with all the underneath documents attached. So electronic submissions are becoming more machine readable. We're talking about machine to machine communication. At the same time, we have to have things that are human readable so we can check
Right.
that information. And this is where we have to go with AI. We can be very efficient, we can be very fast, but at the same time, we need to constrain things so they work in the same way as we work professionally. We don't go to check a regulation. When we want to check a regulation, we go and read the regulation. We don't ask Google or another search engine what the opinion is of people might search for me and will look at what my opinion is. My opinion doesn't matter. What matters is the regulation. And that is what you have to be using in your AI tool, not the general knowledge behind the AI tool. You have to be using, just as you would work as a professional, you have to be using the same core reference materials.
Sort of adding guardrails to the entire system.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
like, I'm an IT guy, and in software side of the industry, a lot of junior roles they're getting squeezed. Whole categories of codes are getting like wiped out with auto-generated and AI-generated codes, and like people are watching jobs and the landscape of jobs changing in real time. Is there something similar happening in the pharmaceutical industry right now? Are there generally work
I
disappearing?
mean, the pharmaceutical and medtech industry has always been an industry of fluctuation. This is very easy to describe. When you develop a new product, you don't need the same team as when you have that product in the market, right? If you're a one product company and you develop that product and launch it on the market, what are you going to do with all the developers?
Right.
And here's a really important point, and that is that staying in one company all the time might not help you as a professional. So if your company grows and launches a product and your skill set is in developing a new product, it could be that you work for a large pharmaceutical research company and you have a very specific indication for use, disease indication that you are an absolute world expert in. Well, if that company moves away from that area, then it's not useful for you to stay in that. And this applies to people who are not world experts, who are just competent and capable in their field of expertise. So where we might see the use, I mean, traditionally in the US, you had programmers, or you had software engineers and you had coders. In
Right.
Europe, we tended to have software engineers who also coded. So now what has happened, we don't need the coding so much, but still need the software engineering. We can use tools to help us in that software engineering, right? And we can tune that software engineering. We can get the tools to draw all our data flow models
Right.
automatically, yes? And not as an image, but as an XML that we can then edit afterwards. So what do I believe is the change? The world is changing, but it always was. At one time, we had sailing ships that went around the world to take tea to Europe, right?
Right.
And there was a race. Who can build the fastest sailing ship, right? And then we had steamships. And even when we had steamships, the sailing ships were still competing, right, with the steamships. They were still competitive. And now we've reached a point, we have different modes of transport. We have trains, we have aircraft, we can fly things around the world, we can ship huge quantities of materials that we couldn't ship. So what has happened? The mode of communications has changed. What is AI doing for us? It's changing our mode of communications and the way we work. Does that mean people lose jobs? Maybe. But we have to remember it's continuous reinvention. The people who built sailing ships may not have been the same people who built steamships, because sailing ships may have been built out of wood and steamships built out of steel. That's a different skill set, and the same applies in our field. The skill of regulatory and quality of that knowledge and experience, that doesn't disappear. And it takes 5 years for someone to become proficient as a regulatory professional in a niche area. And if we look at a quality person, probably takes them 3 years to become proficient as a quality professional. So if we then look at moving that, how does AI change that? AI just changes the breadth that these people can get knowledge. It won't replace them. It doesn't replace human judgment. AI today, as we use it, is a one-way filter. It is not cognitive. It cannot make decisions. For people who need to make decisions, they need to have sufficient information to make decisions. If that sufficient information comes through the use of AI and other tools, then it's great. Maybe they get to their decision more quickly, but it does not replace the cognitive capabilities of the individuals and of the professionals. Moving forward, we may get to cognitive AI. I think we're still a little bit away from that, but we may get there. And if we
Right.
get to cognitive AI, then there'll be a new evolution. We will see new roles, new people. So I would say, yes, people say, if I stay in my job and only do this thing all my life, this is a little bit like an athlete. This is a little bit like Usain Bolt saying, I can still be the fastest person with a walking frame. Yes, it's
You just have to
you have
constantly
to
evolve.
develop. You have to develop throughout your whole lifetime, throughout your whole career.
Going back to the thing that you said about AI being a one-way filter, what is that one thing that you still do manually the old way and you don't rely on AI for that?
Writing, wordsmithing, when I need to tune. So I might get AI to present me a paragraph, and then I will adjust that paragraph. So that wordsmithing is still absolutely necessary. If AI gives me some information and I say, well, that cannot be the case, and then I will say, well, where is the reference? Give me the reference to this information. And then I go and check, and I can see it's not the same. So I would say the absolutely obvious one, yes, I still write documents. I still do documents by hand. I still change documents. I get in the series I've been doing on LinkedIn, a lot of that I'm using AI tools to create the text and to create the diagrams. But in the end, I draw the diagrams by hand. And then I give them back to AI for critic and tuning. And then so so I would say, how has AI changed the way I work? It's changed the way I work in the sense that I have a sparring partner. I'm still doing the same things. I still review documents, but I have a system, a computer tool next to me who can say, well, your assumption here may not be completely correct, or you're not communicating this as well as you could do.
So, for example, let's take Claude. So Claude, what it does is it's like a yes man. A lot of research papers have come recently where they've stated that Claude just, it agrees to every statement that you present to it. How do you tackle that while working in such a regulated environment? As you said, you write documents.
So, so you will always So you will always find that most AI tools will be very complementary. That is because of the basic persona that's programmed in the tool. Now, some weeks ago, or months ago now, I did a training on AI prompting. And in the training on the AI prompting, I put a lot of weight on the persona.
Right.
You can write a persona for your AI. And I created two personas. One was a complete out of control auditor, and one was a very disciplined auditor. And we're using these personas, you can see very quickly which one do I want to work with. So, of course, I want a tool which helps me, encourages me, coaches me. But and that's what comes down to professionalism. That's what comes down to, yes, it's great. Someone can be telling me giving me positive feedback, but I also want the critical feedback. And you can ask the tool to give you that. I haven't tried asking Claude to give me critical feedback, but it probably will if you ask. I've used Claude for other things, so I think it will still give you a good feedback if you ask. I think always question the output when you're using an LLM one way. So this is the whole point of my series. By creating AI skills, you can actually create validated outputs. So you reduce the possibility for hallucination. I haven't had any hallucinations occurring or bias occurring with my AI skills that I've been applying. But I'm not saying it's impossible, but you certainly reduce this possibility. Whereas when you're using the general data set available without the constraints of AI skills, then then you really have to start checking at the outputs that you're getting. If we look at a year ago, I always use the end of year greetings of 2024. It was very difficult to generate graphics with text in them where the words were correct.
Right, it just
And
went
here we are in
haywire.
2026. The text in the graphics is correct. Or, for instance, there was a time when you couldn't trust numbers in AI. And I'm very careful with math. I still don't completely trust AI with math. So you have to check your output, because AI will give you an output. But if you, for instance, often it will generate you an output, and what it has done, it has generated a piece of code, and that code has generated the output. But you don't see that code, and you have to ask for that code so you can see what's going on.
Right, right, right. 100% agreed. I think it's the engineer side which, you have to get it right and, just sort of tuning
Yes,
it. I think
yes,
last Friday you posted about the LLM outputs. They look fine on paper, but it can't be defended on audit. So walk me through what's actually
right.
missing in these LLM
So
outputs.